Hello, friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach podcast. Today, I have a wonderful guest for you. His name is Eric G., and he's a personality based life coach and a writing coach, and has been doing that for over 20 years. He's the author of the book, The Power of Personality: Unlock the Secrets to Understanding Everyone in Your Life, including yourself. And he also has some other amazing things that he's going to tell us about. He's got a huge bio that I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm super excited to have him here because everyone knows I love personality stuff. And I'm happy to meet you and happy to welcome you to the podcast, Eric.
Thank you for having me, Julie.
It's wonderful to have you. So I always ask all my guests their story to tell me their story. So you can tell me as much or as little as you want, but just kind of tell me how you got to where you are today.
I like that you said I had a huge bio. It's huge. I don't necessarily know if it's amazing, but it's huge because I'm the personality type that it never sets his mind on anything and likes to do a lot of different things. So then I end up having to throw that all into my bio. But
Yeah, you have the personality of like a golden retriever where you're
oh yeah, I'm 100%.
distracted. That's how I am.
I'm like, what, frisbee? Oh, okay. I just follow the
Exactly.
frisbee and then
Yeah.
another frisbee. But yeah, I got started mainly because speaking of personality types, growing up, I had a personality type that was maybe a little different than the norm. And I say norm with like all things considered, but and so I was always wondering like, why are my values so different than some of the kids around me? I didn't necessarily care about grades as much as maybe some other kids. I didn't necessarily care about following the rules as much as other kids. And so I really was trying to figure out why I was such a weirdo. And so that got into like studying personality. And I've been doing that ever since. And now that I started an education company well, 15 years ago. So I owned that for about a decade. And I was able to create this personality typing methodology based on a lot of the theories like Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, um, so forth, stuff that I had read. And I used that to build my own over like 10 years of working with maybe 1,000 kids, 1,000 students
Wow.
a year. So I now I teach my teachers how to use it. And I found that to be super helpful because I think are all different. And I think when we start to understand like our values are different, that's when we can really start to get along better, I think.
Absolutely. And I think it teaches, at least my philosophy on that is it teaches you to understand yourself. And
Mhm.
if you understand yourself better, then you're more tolerant of others and you understand what their personalities are. That's what it helps me with.
Right. And also, yeah, and I think the number one thing we all want to know, and I work with a lot of young kids or young people, I should say, not kids, young people, and they don't necessarily know what makes them happy. And oftentimes they're not really told what makes them happy. They're told, oh, get good grades, do this, succeed at this. This is what's going to lead you to success, is just working hard at this particular thing. And I think they never actually take the time to reflect, oh, am I enjoying this? And then they
Yeah.
get to be like 40 and they're like, wow, I've been doing a job for 20 years that I hate. What am I doing with my life? And I just don't want my students to get to that point. So I try to help them
Yeah.
think about
So
it.
what age of kids do you work with? You say kids.
You
What
know,
do you
I do work with adults as well. That's where the life coaching comes in. A lot of the life coaching is with like 40, 45-year olds who are like, gosh, I hate my job. Like,
midlife crisis,
yeah. And instead of like looking for a sports car, they're looking for like a better life, which I think is better, you
a
know?
different job or a different career,
Yes.
right?
Right. And relationships get involved in that too, right? Like, oh, am I with the right person? But majority of my students tend to be around, I usually start them around 11 or 12. And then I
Okay.
just, I coach them for as long as they'll have me. That really to me is such an important, obviously adolescence is such an important time in our lives. We're really
Yeah.
figuring out stuff. And so I really enjoy that. I think it's also the time where parents are just like, God, I do not understand my kid anymore. Why are they always yelling at me? Like, why don't they listen to me at all? They're not sweet anymore. They're not cute or nice anymore. They got
That
BO.
preteen angst and
Yes.
hormones and all that.
Right. And that's my wheelhouse. That's like, okay, that's okay. I can help you. And that's when I jump in and kind of like, try to create a bond and, relate to the kids on their level, depending. And I just really just figure out what their personality is and connect that way versus trying to come from a avenue of this is the right way to do things. And either you're
Right.
doing it right or you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Do you feel like the way the education system is set up that it kind of squashes the personality out of them?
Yeah, unfortunately, like I mean, obviously we've all had those teachers that are fantastic, and then they kind of do their own thing, and they really do focus on like working
Right.
with each kid individually. But I always adhere to that quote from Baldwin that I always paraphrase, and I always mess it up, but something along the lines of like the irony of education is the more we become educated, the more we start to question the education system. And
Mm,
I think
true.
that, like it does kind of squash kids' ability to think for themselves, even though ironically, that's what school should be for. But
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I just the experience with my own kids, it seems like um it the teachers want them to behave so badly because they have so many children that I think that they kind of put a little bit too much emphasis on just sitting still and behaving. And I don't think, especially boys, I don't think kids are designed that way.
yeah, and I do go over it in my book that, I split people up into, oh, you'll appreciate that being a veterinarian. I split people up into four packs, and then within those
Love
four
it.
packs, there are four animals.
Oh, okay, perfect. So
Yeah,
teach us about it. This is your own system that you came up with
right.
to test for personality. Do you call
Mhm.
it preferences or traits, or what do you call it?
I would call them temperaments.
Temperaments.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do separate temperament from character. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, but this person's a jerk. I'm like, well, any
That's
personality
different.
can be a jerk. Now, I will say that
Right.
depending on our personality, when we go bad, we tend to go bad a certain way.
Correct.
Like the person who's really organized and structured and responsible, when they go bad, they're probably not going to go bad in a way where they're reckless and like overconsumptive. They're going to probably be maybe a fascist. They might be
Right.
a bit of a
Right.
dictator.
Yeah. Yeah. Or real bossy and real
Right.
opinionated and uh,
Yeah, so,
kind of
you
a
know,
dictator in there. I'm thinking of it from a veterinary hospital perspective. Like if you have a boss that's like that,
hmm,
very
right.
controlling and micromanaging and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the hospital. What do they call it? The hospital, not the manager. I keep thinking of the show House because Cuddy
Oh
has that
yeah.
personality, and
Yeah, exactly.
for some reason I cannot think of her title, but hospital director. Um,
Okay, yeah, like the one that's in the, yeah, I know what you're talking about. The one that's in charge,
yeah, yeah, and you need that. Like my
administrator.
mom was that kind of personality, and she was a school principal, so you do
Yeah,
need that. But and of course, when they go bad, they'll go bad a certain way, and then other types will go bad their own way.
right. Yeah. Okay,
But
so
I'm
go back to, I kind of got you off track.
oh sorry,
Tell us, no, that's okay. This is how it'll be because I think we have similar personalities.
just go
Um,
in.
yeah, teach us about your system and how it works and
Okay, so there's four packs, and obviously, if you're an animal within, you share a pack with someone, then you're going to have similarities. But within that pack, you'll also have differences. And
right.
four animals for four packs, and my math is correct, that's 16 different animal types. And I
Yeah,
know a lot of people say that's MBTI. I'm like, yes, it is loosely based on MBTI or Myers-Briggs,
right.
but the way that I get there is very different. Like I don't truly follow introversion, extroversion because I feel like that's all contextual. So the
Yeah.
way I get there is I first separate people into four different packs based on their core value. And the reason why I mentioned it was when we were talking about school again, about half the population fit into one major pack. And when you have half the population valuing the same thing, that value tends to get pushed onto the other half. Because
Oh, okay.
right, when you see someone next to you and like if 50% of the time they're going to be the same value as you, then you're like, oh, okay, this is normal. And
Right. That's the
see
way it
something
should
different.
be.
Yeah. And then they're like, oh, this is abnormal. And so school is a lot like that. That 50%, their core value, I call them gatherers. Um,
Okay.
so sorry, the four packs are gatherers, hunters, shamans, and smiths. And I base those kind of like on like a medieval village and what roles we have. And just like the roles in the village, we don't need that many smiths. You really only need one smith to create the tools and the weapons, but you need a
Mm,
lot of gatherers to gather the harvest, and that's why
okay.
gatherers make up about half the population.
That's the
And
half. Okay.
yes, and their core desire is safety and security. So they
Okay.
protect
That
the
makes
village.
sense.
Yeah, they're cautious. They follow the rules. They follow the rules not because they can't think for themselves, but they follow the rules because following the rules makes everyone's safer. There's a certain sense of certainty. If you know, okay, this person's abiding by the same thing that I'm abiding by,
Hmm.
everything's going to be pretty consistent. Um, and we're all going to kind of follow that to create a better society. I mean, that's
Right.
the ideal.
Right.
Uh, so when you get to school, that's why you see like the kids following the teacher and following the rules. A majority of, I would say more than a majority, I'd say like probably 80% of elementary school teachers are gatherers, which makes sense. They're trying to
Yeah.
create a safe space. Kindergarten
Right.
teachers, come on, like you want to keep a
Oh,
safe
yeah.
space where kids feel welcome, and that's great. The downside, of course, is there's a certain rigidity to that. And I think that's when the other personality types can come in and kind of add like their own touch to civilization so that we can all
Okay.
have a better world.
Okay, that's cool. Got it. I'm taking notes. So if I keep looking down, that's why I like to write this stuff down. So I'm making sure I'm getting it.
Oh yeah, no, and I can get really wonky on stuff like this or wonkish where it just gets like into like the details. So I mean,
Yeah.
I enjoy it, and um, I find like I encounter a lot of gatherers, especially in the education system, and I think that's great, but I'm always like, okay, but the other kids also need help with what they're good at. Uh,
Right.
and like a third of the population are hunters, and hunters seek excitement, visceral excitement. Like they want to experience every part of the world through their senses that they can. They want to eat everything, taste everything, hear everything, feel everything, you know, um, smell everything. And I think you can see, oh, there's a natural conflict with the gatherer, right? If you have someone whose value is excitement and taking
Yeah.
chances, and the other person is security and safety, like they're going to clash.
Right. They're not gonna like the same things or want to do things the same way.
Right. One's going to be like, yeah, let's go on that roller coaster. And the other one's like, why do you want to go on a roller coaster? Because it just throws me around and I feel like I might die. And the person's like, that's not fun. Like, why would you want to
Right.
feel
We
that
don't want
way?
to die. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so you get that conflict quite a bit because obviously you put 50% next to a third, that makes about 85% of the population fit into one of
Right.
those two groups.
Yeah.
And that's generally the conflict we often see portrayed in the media. Like if you think of the odd couple, you think of Bert and Ernie, you think of that very responsible, like kind of like stoic personality. And then you have like the fun loving, like off the wall character. And those are
Yeah.
obviously caricatures, but
Right.
you know.
Okay. That's interesting. All right. And then there's two more, right?
Yes, there are the shamans and the smiths, and together they make up about 50% of the population, or sorry, 15% of the population. And one of them seeks self-knowledge, and the other seeks knowledge or information, I should say. I used to say knowledge, and then everybody thought they were Smith. And I'm
Oh,
like, oh,
okay.
not everyone seeks it the same way. And the test I always give to see if someone's a Smith is I ask them, oh, like if you had to experiment on a drug to see if it worked, would you experiment on yourself to see if it worked? And there could be side effects. And generally, people will be like, if you're a gatherer, you'll be like, hell no, like that's
Heck
like
no. Right.
no way. But a
Yeah.
Smith, they're not necessarily going to say yes, but they're going to be like, they might pause and think about it for a bit and like kind of weigh. They might ask the question like, what is it going to solve? Is it going to cure cancer? And then I'm like,
Okay.
okay. And
So
like
they would want the details about it before they made the decision.
they would consider it, and some might just say yes. Like I've talked to Smiths where they're like, they would. Smith just recently told me I would go into a burning building, a burning library to rescue a book and risk my life if I thought it was the only book of its kind left on the planet.
Oh, okay. As you're saying that, someone's coming to mind that might be one of those. So this is interesting. Okay. So
Yeah.
those are the four packs.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. And then of course the shamans I mentioned, yeah, they seek self-knowledge. So they're always about like doing things, whatever they do, the motivation is discovering more about themselves. They're very
Okay.
self-reflective, they're introspective. They often think, oh, what did this mean? How did I feel while I was doing it? They're often in their own heads.
Yes.
And yeah, that describes them pretty well.
Okay. Great. Okay. And then amongst those four packs, then it splits out into the animals.
Yes, then there are four
Okay. Is
animals
that where
within.
you want to go next, or is there something else you need to tell us before I push
No,
you?
I mean we can go there if you.
No,
I
I
love
want
to.
you to lead it because you know
Okay.
about this and I don't. I'm learning.
Oh, so like yeah, I can tell like the four animals within each pack. I can go with the gatherers first. Like we have the stags, the beavers, the elephants, and the bears.
Okay.
And I split those into two groups within the gatherers. And then I split those sorry, it's getting confusing, but
No,
I
that's
split
okay.
them up into their own two separate groups. So like if you're a gatherer, you like safety and security. And how do you get there? By either focusing on duty and family. Those are the two
Okay.
things that gatherers love most of all. It doesn't mean that other types don't love their family and don't love following a sense of duty, but these are their number one priorities. And the beaver and the stags will focus more on duty, and the elephants and the bears will focus more on family.
Okay. So explain how someone might because you said most people are the gatherers.
Mhm.
Explain how you might, if you think someone's a gatherer, how would you split them into those two?
The example I always give is at a parent teacher conference, and I'm sure people out there have been to a parent teacher conference on either side, either the teacher, the parent, or the kid.
Yeah, a lot of times I've been there. Yeah.
Generally, if you're debating between if you know your parents a gatherer, if then the teacher comes up and says, "Hey, you know what? Your son or daughter, they've been misbehaving. Like they've been really doing this in class, and it's been really disruptive." The stags and the beavers will almost always side with the teacher. 100%. They will
Okay.
not side with their kid at all. They'll be like, "Oh, like okay, I'm
You
gonna
won't
take them
even give
home
them
and
the benefit of the doubt.
nope." They're like, "I'm gonna take them home and I will deal with it." That's exactly what they say. Because it's not because they don't love their kid. It's because they love duty first, and their duty in their mind as a parent is to make sure that they raise a fine, upstanding citizen.
Okay.
That's in their mind,
Yeah.
like, no, I'm going to be a good parent. And being a good parent means I got to teach my kid the right thing to do.
Right.
That's how
Yeah.
they express their love.
Okay.
Um, the other side, elephants and bears, they might not necessarily side with the kid, but they might fall on a sword for their kid. They might be like,
Yeah.
oh, it's my fault.
Protect them a little bit.
Yeah, I've been coming home late from work. I haven't been able to support them as much as I should. Or they might just side with the kid and say, "Oh, you're wrong, teacher." But for the
Okay.
most part, I think it's generally the first one. They'll just kind of like fall on their sword.
Yeah.
And that's like a really very practical way of just determining the two. Just like, oh, okay, like,
It splits them up pretty well. Yeah. That makes sense.
yeah, and like both are great. There's nothing wrong with either one. Obviously, they have their downsides. If you have parents who are dutiful, then they'll be tough. They're the most likely to give their kid independence. So like when they go to college, they're gonna be like, no, they got to take care of themselves because I raised them the right way. They're gonna take care of themselves. On the flip side, the negative aspect of that is they might be a bit rigid. They might even seem a bit cold or mean to their kids, maybe a little distant.
Yeah.
Um, versus the other side, which will always seem warm and loving. Their kid will never feel unloved if you have an elephant or bear as your mom or dad.
Hmm.
Uh, However, they're also the parent that's gonna be like, "Oh, wait, you're going to college? Oh, you know what? You don't need to leave home. Like, stay here, and let me
They'll
smother
try to
you."
keep them close because it's the
Yeah.
family thing.
Uh-huh. They will like it's just a hurt inside. They are definitely people who are pained by the empty nest. The empty
Okay.
nest is just like, oh, like that's the worst thing for them.
That's too much. Yeah.
So
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, because they're all about safety and security. And if the kid leaves, then it's danger.
right, exactly. And they're just like, oh my gosh, like my kid is like in danger.
Yeah. All right.
Um,
I want to just throw something out there because a lot of the people that listen to me are veterinarians and we deal with a lot of people that
mhm.
we have to read quickly and try to decide what they need from us. That's why I love personality profiling so much. Is like if I can kind of figure out my client and who they are, I can do a
Yeah.
better job at serving them. And so this might be a good way to kind of try to figure out how you should talk to a client about their pet,
Oh,
just
right, right.
based on the example you just gave about the teachers.
Right. How it's also you can decipher their relationship with their pet, right? Like like what is their exact connection? What do they get out of it? What is their focus?
Right, right. Are they focused on, keeping that pet really coddled, or are they keeping that pet well behaved and thin enough and like they're very rigid in their
You can also generally tell to, and not always, but like what dog. Like, I mean, once again, I'm assuming dogs. I don't know what the
yeah,
majority of your
dogs,
dogs are.
cats. But yeah, dogs is a good example because there's so many different kinds of dogs.
Yeah, cats are a little different. Cats are almost like if you look at it as like a breed of dog. I know they're not, but like people
Sure. They have their
people who have
own personality. Yeah.
yeah, people who have cats, they tend to have a certain personality because cats tend to be more independent. They're
Right.
not as coddled. So you're going to have personality types generally who are also not particularly coddling. If you have like an elephant or bear and they have a pet, more than likely they're going to have a dog, and they're more than likely they're going to have a dog that they can hug, like physically. Well, I guess you can always hug a dog, but
Right.
maybe a toy dog or something a little
Right.
smaller, maybe not like a
Yeah.
pit bull or something.
Okay.
But
Okay. Cool. All right. That's helpful. I just wanted to throw that out there because I think if people are listening, they can use some of these examples to help them figure out other people that they interact with and they're on their team or in the exam room.
oh right, like I've done a lot of I won't say lectures because lectures always sound boring. Talks. I've done a lot of talks in offices.
Presentations.
Yes, presentations, PowerPoint presentations. No,
Yeah.
I've done a lot of those in professional offices, mainly because, of course, you want to get along with everyone. And obviously, at work, people don't always get along with everyone. And it's important to at least understand the other person so that you can understand why you're having a conflict. You might not necessarily agree with the reason, but at least you'll understand it better.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm jumping backwards now before we go on to the next personality thing here. Um, Other than the teaching, how did this spark in your interest? Was it just all teaching, or do you have some other story about how I got so into personalities?
Well, I'm also, so my background is, or my academic background rather, is in screenwriting, and it's super helpful with writing characters.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
that
like
makes
because it's
sense.
archetypal, right? And you can understand,
Right,
oh, this character, if you have this kind of personality type, and then this character has this personality type, you can see the consistencies of how they're going to conflict, and then it
right.
feels right. You know,
Oh, that's really interesting.
yeah. And I always like a good example. And I'm sure people understand this example. Is Harry Potter. So
I love
Harry,
Harry Potter,
yeah,
yeah.
and Harry Potter's, okay, this is theory, of course, but Harry Potter's personality type theoretically is almost a perfect match for Hermione Granger's personality type. So it's funny. I remember arguing with a friend of mine when I think book 5 was coming out at the time. And I was just like, I'm like, Harry should end up with Hermione, right? And she's like, I hate to break it to you, but that's not happening. I'm like, I know, I can see, I can read. I know she's gonna end up with Ron.
Right,
I'm
yeah,
saying that if I was writing the story, it would be that she would end up with Harry. Like that just seems to be more real and more natural.
right, yeah.
Um, and then, of course, when J.K. Rowling came out and said, "Oh yeah, I made a mistake. Harry should end up with Hermione." Of course, I sent the first message I sent was to the friend, like, "See, I told you."
Yeah,
Because I know J.K. Rowling said that she just did it because it was a decision that she always wanted, and she just kind of stuck with it no matter what. But I think with
right.
writing, it's kind of cool to understand personality because you understand what this personality is going to get from this one and how they're going to conflict.
I
Uh,
love that.
yeah, and with Harry and Hermione, it's pretty obvious. Like she's ambitious, hardworking, extremely intelligent. He's kind of moody, uh, talented, sensitive, intuitive, and that's a good match for each other. They kind of like
Right.
they speak on the same communication level, but they're different in every other way.
Yeah, where Ron's kind of a goofball.
Yeah, Ron is like he's just not on their communication level, right? Where they're not at a higher communication level. It's just a different one. He's more so another way you can separate personalities is how they can communicate. Do they speak in concrete language or abstract language? And Ron is concrete. Like he sees things concretely. Like what do I like to eat? What is my favorite sport? I root for this team. Who are my favorite family members? Who are the family members I don't like? Where
Yeah,
Hermione is always thinking about school, like ideas, like theories, strategies. And then
hmm,
Harry, of course, is always inward, like what am I feeling? What are my emotions? And that's like a different kind of language, I think.
yeah. Okay, I love that. All right, so we talked about gatherers. The next one is hunters, right?
Oh yeah, hunters.
Or does this break down more?
So it breaks down, well, how I broke them apart into twos, and then it breaks into so once you have stags and beavers on one side, then you can break those apart. But we don't need to go on to all that because that's a lot of
That's
information.
too deep for us. Okay. Well,
People can people can buy the book if they want to go that deep, but that might take a
yeah,
while.
I
So I won't
definitely
do it.
will. Yeah, I'm definitely going to read it. Okay, so the hunters.
So hunters seek, I say excitement, and a lot of hunters will be like, "What are you trying to make us out to be like superficial?" And I'm like, "No, it just means you want to get the most out of life physically." And they're like, "Oh, okay, I kind of like that actually." I'm like, "Yeah." And so thus their great fear, of course, is a lack of freedom.
Hmm.
Which is funny because once again, that comes into direct conflict with gatherers because gatherers often are safe and secure. And sometimes when you feel the need to be safe and secure, freedom kind of gets taken away a little bit. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, so with hunters, I always find, like, especially with teachers, when they're identifying a hunter, and parents too, I always say it's easy. The hunter is the kid when you tell them, hey, if you eat the cookie from that cookie jar, I'm going to slap you. The hunter is the kid who's like, let me think about that. And because they're calculating, is the slap worth the cookie?
The cookie, right.
And they're like, I think it is actually. Okay, cookie. All right, give me the slap. And I think a lot of gatherers say, no, you're not. That's not the point. The point is, I told you that because you're supposed to listen to me. Like
Right.
I don't want
Yeah.
to slap you. I'm
It's a
telling you,
test. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm the authority. Listen to me because I don't want you eating the cookie. But yeah, hunters don't think that way. They bend the rules. They want to know the rules so they can bend them and go around them. Um, and they take a lot of risks. And I think that's really important because oftentimes if you have a gatherer teacher and they're forcing their philosophy on kids about not taking risks and always being cautious, you're literally taking away the hunter's greatest strength. And if they don't learn how to take risks when they're young, when the stakes are low, when they become adults and the stakes are higher, they're not going to be able to take the right risks.
Okay.
It's like a gambler. People might think of gambling. If you tell a gatherer, oh, you want to gamble, they're like, oh no, that's irresponsible. It's like, well, there's a reason why there's some professional gamblers out there. There are professional poker players out there
Mhm.
because they know the rules and they've mastered the ability to take the right risk.
Okay.
And we think of all the jobs that are out there that also take risks, like firefighters, uh, Navy SEALs, and anything where there's a bit like deep sea fishermen. Like
Mm,
those are all jobs where you can very easily die. And
right.
if you don't learn how to take the right risk, then that may well be the case.
And
So
somebody has to do it.
yeah, someone has to do it. And the funny thing is they like it. They enjoy it. Like generally, I mean, you talk to a seal or a deep sea fisherman, like, yeah, that's great. I go there
Yeah.
for 3 months. I see the ocean. It's pretty crazy. And then I go back and do what I want at home because I only have to
Right.
work there for 3 months.
Yeah.
My sister's a hunter, so I know that well. And the first job she got out of, um, oh, you'll appreciate it because she wanted to be a veterinarian. That's what
Okay.
she studied. She loved animals. She still loves animals, but her
Right.
problem is she's allergic
Oh,
she's very
yeah.
allergic. So she's like, I can't be a veterinarian for just like hypoallergenic dogs.
That would be a small practice.
Yeah. So for her first job out of college was on a deep sea fishing boat. She,
Really?
I think she was like I don't know what the term for it was, but basically the person who was like, oh, can you catch this animal or do you have to throw it back? Is this okay to keep this lobster? No, throw it
Okay.
back. That
Yeah,
person.
like she had to be the judge or the ruler over those things.
Right. But it's just
That's
so funny because it's like, going on a deep sea fishing boat into the middle of Alaska, that's not
yeah,
necessarily people's first thought.
right.
But it was for her. She loved it.
And she
Uh,
loved it. That's cool.
yeah. So those are
Now,
the hunters.
okay, those are the hunters. Are they broken down into more?
Yeah. So you can split them up into two ways. They're the foxes and the sharks. And I think when I say fox, everybody knows what a fox means, right? Like that's like, oh, okay, I know exactly what a fox is like.
Yeah.
And so foxes and sharks are on one side, and then I put peacocks and butterflies on the other side. And you can imagine what a peacock is like too. A lot of the reason why I use animals is people go like, "Oh, okay, I know what a peacock
You
is."
kind of get it. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
easier than some of the other ones where you have to learn the different types. This kind of helps you remember.
right. And this is just based on experience. When I used to talk to people about like their Myers-Briggs, and they're like, "I did that once. What did I get? Like IJLMP?" Like this.
Myers-Briggs is hard even for me, and I've learned a lot about it, but um yeah, it's very detailed and nuanced, and also there's just a lot of letters to
Right.
learn.
It's just yeah, and then it becomes no fun. And then I
Right.
then I tell people, no, just remember this person's a fox. So like they are a fox. They're always like
Yeah.
trying to trick me and
Yeah,
like
that's
I get it
awesome.
now.
Yeah.
So foxes and sharks, they get their excitement through like I just say an adrenaline rush. So they get
Okay.
it through
They're
things
the
like
adrenaline junkies.
yeah, like they're the skydivers, they love the roller coasters, they love anything where they feel a little bit in danger, mountain climbing,
Yeah.
that's what they love. And not to say
Okay.
the other hunters don't, but of course it's just priorities, right?
Right. Right.
Um, so the peacocks and the butterflies, they get their excitement through consumption. Like, so they love to listen to the most beautiful music, taste the most delicious things, like all that. They love a massage. You tell a peacock or
Right.
butterfly, hey, you want a massage? They're like,
Yeah.
yes,
They're all for it. Okay.
yes. They also
Makes
tend to be
sense.
masseuses, so makes sense.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, and that's how I would separate those two.
Yeah, that's helpful. Okay. But it's all about the excitement for them.
Yeah, it's all about that visceral feeling of like experiencing life. I keep saying visceral because they're all about the physicality. It's not like an internal excitement. It's not like, oh, like I'm so great because I just got my PhD. You know, like that is not exciting for them.
That's
Exciting,
different. Yeah.
yeah, exciting for them is eating a fruit that they have never eaten before. That's exciting.
Trying something new.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then there's the two more groups.
Yeah, I like to call them the weirdos. You know, I'm okay. I'm comfortable saying that because I'm in one of those weird groups. So you know, but there's less of them, and so oftentimes, you know, I when I meet them when they're my students, they're always feeling a little left out, and they kind of feel like, oh, like I am not
Don't
right.
fit in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's something wrong with me,
Oh,
and that's the shaman type. That's the most likely to feel that way. They're the
okay.
most likely because self-knowledge is their what they desire most, which also means that they don't feel like they truly know themselves always. So I always like to say, like, you know, they talk about a midlife crises, like that applies to some types, but never applies to the shaman. Shamans never have a midlife crisis because their whole life is a midlife crisis. Their
Yeah,
whole
those
life,
are the people that are old when they're kids,
yes,
like an old soul.
they're old souls. And the funny thing is they're young when they're old because they're the most in touch with, they don't necessarily feel like they have to act. You know, I guess an old soul isn't necessarily old per se, like the
Right.
way we think of adults. And like, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
I had a conversation with my niece. You know, my niece is 10. Well, actually, she was 9 when she told me this, but she
Yeah.
always likes to make fun of me. She's like, "Oh, Uncle Eric's bad at adulting." You know,
Yeah,
and
that's the
well,
word, right?
yeah, yeah. My niece says that, and my nephew says it. My nephew actually told my teacher that I was bad at adulting, and I
I
found that
love
out
that.
when I went to visit his open house, and she came up to me,
Yeah.
"Oh, you know, Edwin said something funny to me the other day," and I'm like, "Oh
You're
yeah,
bad
that's
at
he was
adulting.
talking about me, not my brother. That's me for sure."
Right.
But I laughed at that. I'm like, "Oh, so what's adulting to you?" And she's like, "Oh, well, adulting is buying a house." I'm like, "Oh, really? Okay, like that's what adulting is." Okay, I'm
At
like,
9.
"Well, yeah." Like I said, that's not the secret to adulting. She's like, "What's the secret to adulting?" I mean, the secret to adulting is finding out what you really love and then going for that.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Not all of us can find something we truly love.
Well, and some people, yeah, because they're kind of locked in. They don't have that ability to find it, so they need help.
Right. And you know,
That's
like
what you do,
especially with
right?
kids. Yeah, I mean that's what I try. You know, if I ask a kid, "Oh, what jobs have you heard of?" Like oftentimes they say doctor, lawyer, engineer, teacher. Like there's like 4 or 5 jobs they'll say. I'm like,
Right.
what's some other job? Like even someone I had a student recently who he's actually going to University of Southern California, USC.
Hmm.
As a UCLA graduate, I'm shocked that I recommended that school for him, but I did
Right.
because it was
Yeah.
perfect for what he wanted to do. But when he first started with me, I was like, "What do you want to like major in? What do you want to study?" He's like, "Business." I'm like, "Okay, business is the thing that people say when they don't know what they want, and they just like
Right.
have this
Right. Because it
general
kind of
like,
covers a lot. You can do a
yeah,
lot with a business degree, right?
right." And a lot of hunters will say business because it always has this feeling of freedom. They're like, "Oh, I can do a lot with this. Like, and
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
doing things. I'm earning what I'm getting. You know, if
Right.
I work hard and if I act smart, then
Yeah.
I get
Then
it."
I'll get a return.
Right. So it just took a little prying, and then I finally just said, like, if you had a dream of all the jobs you want to would take, if you had to make a wish and a genie came and said, "I'm going to give you the job you want," what would it be? And he said, "Oh, probably either a sports agent or a sports executive." I'm like,
Oh,
"Okay, we can
now
go
we're
with it."
getting somewhere.
Yeah, that sounds like that's something you love,
Right.
something you thought, "Oh, business, random." Like if you said
Right.
that,
Right. Yeah. It's more specific and it's more of a goal.
yeah, I have a student who said governor of North Carolina. I'm like, "Okay, that's perfect.
Oh,
That's
yeah. That's
you know that
that's so specific.
That's
Yeah.
very specific. I'm like, it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you're going to get there, but
Right.
it's a good direction
The
because that sounds,
direction. Yeah.
yeah, you can be like a political scientist. You can work on a
Right.
bunch of campaigns. You can do all that stuff, or maybe
Yeah.
be governor of North Carolina. I don't know. So
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Okay. So do you have animals for that one?
there are the hunters are foxes, sharks. Oh, I'm sorry,
You
shamans.
did
We're in
you
shaman.
did, yeah, you did the hunters.
I'm getting my animals mixed up. Yes. So the
That's okay.
shamans can be, since self-knowledge is what they desire, they can kind of be split up into 2 groups as well. One is more pragmatic. One of the people who get self-knowledge through interacting with people. So people are their priority. The other group, their priority is principles or are principles, ethics.
Okay.
So they're principals first, and the other group are people first. And the people first animals are dolphins and pandas.
All
And the
right, that
principal,
makes sense.
yeah, because when you think of dolphins and pandas, you think of like being, around people or
And
people.
liking people. Yeah.
Yeah, in
Not
groups.
eating them.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And the principal first shamans are baboons and humpback whales. And I always decipher it by saying, like, if you have a teacher and if you're a teacher and you got this like crazy system that is not like standard and very not traditional, but it's working with your students, and then the principal finds out and comes to you and says, hey, you can't do that anymore. The pandas and the dolphins will say, okay, I'm going to try to find a way to modify my lesson, but I'm going to listen and kind of take away like the more offensive parts of it so I can remain here and teach them. Because
Okay.
people come first and they realize
Right.
that if they really don't listen to the principal, then they're going to get fired and they're not going to be here to help.
And they won't have their people. Yeah.
They want to have their people.
Right.
Principal first people, principal first animals say, hell with it. I don't care. Like I'm doing it the way I want to do it. It works. Like I believe in this.
A
And
little
you
more
can fire me if you
stubborn.
want. Yes, you
Yeah.
can fire me
Okay.
if you want. And and once again, there's strengths and weaknesses to each one of those things. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Dead Poet Society.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've
Obviously,
seen the
there's
movie.
a baboon teacher in there. He's a
Yeah.
Robin Williams character. Robin Williams himself was probably a baboon, so it's probably
Yeah.
why the character was so perfect for him.
Yes. Yeah.
And he pretty much said, "No, this is what I believe. I'm going to teach it." Of course,
Right.
obviously, we know the consequences of what happened.
Yeah.
But that's a very big shaman movie because a lot of the students are shamans, like the student Neil. Oh, spoiler alert here, but the student Neil who kills himself at the end, he's a
Right.
dolphin. And so he had the worst part of being a dolphin, which is since you want to be around people, you want to assimilate as much as you can, but there's always this feeling of not belonging. And that conflict, it obviously caused like the worst case scenario for him. But for a lot of shamans, it causes a lot of insecurity and tension. Uh,
Okay. So that's part of that personality type is the insecurity.
Oh yeah, they always feel a little different and different in a way where they want to be like other people. And I think, part
Okay.
of me when I have a shaman student is like trying to teach them like, no, you're okay. The way you are is okay.
Right. Yeah. You
Be
don't
like,
have to be like others.
yeah. And
Okay.
that's super important. I do have a lot of shaman students probably for that reason because it's an easy connect and I can really help them with that.
Right. Because you understand them.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last one is the Smiths. And you said that's the most rare? Or the
This
shamans and the Smiths are both very rare.
Yeah, shamans and smiths are pretty rare. Everybody wants to be a smith until they actually meet a smith, and they're always like, "God, that person's an asshole." And I'm like, "Well, that's what you said you wanted to be, and clearly
That's
you
how they
are
are.
like it."
Yeah.
Yeah. And not all smiths are like that, but I make that as a joke because sometimes they are, and
Yeah.
oftentimes people are like, "Are they on the spectrum?" And
Okay.
it's smiths seek information. Um,
Yes.
and you can split them up into two different groups. There's the killer whales and the spiders and they seek information to use it. Like they want like the most, they're also really pragmatic. They want to they're very ambitious and they want information because they want to use that information to take them to greater heights. They're
Okay.
the Hermione Grangers of the world. Most CEOs, a large percentage of CEOs are killer whales. Like they're just like, I see it, I go for it. This is my strategy.
Ruthless and kind of
Yeah. And
climbers.
Hermione's a bit ruthless, like
Oh
she'll
yeah.
just yeah, like there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. I like killer whales quite a bit, but it can be off-putting for other types.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I like those kind of people too. I've always said that. And people say, "Oh, that guy's mean or that guy's rude." I'm like, "Yeah, but he's kind of cool too."
Yeah,
Like
and
some of the clients.
it shows you a bit of your personality too. There's something, there's something like, oh, that's appealing. That's something about that is appealing for me, but other personality types it might not be appealing for.
Right,
The
right.
truth,
Yeah.
they're always going to tell you the truth, unless it
Right.
suits them to not tell you the truth. But for the most part, they can't help but be honest, which is why people think of
That
them.
they're jerks. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Okay,
but if
cool.
you ask them, they'd be like, "Well, I don't know. You asked, so you asked me how you looked." I remember I was working with a parent, and she was like, "Yeah, is my kid on the spectrum?" Actually, he actually was on the spectrum, but she's like, "Yeah, because I asked him how I looked the other day. Like I was wearing a dress and I was going out. I said, 'How do I look?' And he's like, 'You look terrible.'" He's like, "What? You're not supposed to say that." He's like, "I thought you asked me for the
You
truth."
asked me,
Yeah, you
right?
asked me,
Like you
and
didn't
she's
try
like,
to
"Well,
spare her
no."
feelings at all.
Yeah. She's like, he
Yeah,
didn't even say like, oh, like, well, you maybe try something different. He just said I
yeah.
look terrible. And I was like, well, you asked.
Yeah.
So there's the killer whales and the spiders, and the other end, you have the chimpanzees and the owls, and they seek information because it's fun. They seek information for
To gather it.
information's sake. Yeah, they just love knowledge. They love. I have a friend who's an owl, and owls are often like perceived as always being geniuses, which I have a problem with personality type in general. When people go like, "Oh, Einstein's an owl," so that's I'm an owl. I'm a genius because
Right,
Einstein.
right. Yeah. No, it's not the same, right?
Yeah. No, it's you guys have the same personality. So Einstein came with mismatched socks. You're probably wearing mismatched socks. But like you're probably not going to come up with a theory like the theory of relativity. But you might. I don't know. But
Right.
a friend of mine who's an owl, he's always like, yeah, people think I'm a genius. And it's like, no, I just know a lot of information. But the stuff I know information about, I know a lot about massage and I know a lot about fantasy football. That doesn't make me a genius. And he doesn't care. He's just like, I just like this stuff.
He just likes learning about those things.
Yeah, he'll be on the internet for hours looking up what this player did last year and 2 years ago and 3 years ago.
Yeah.
They just love it. And the same with the chimpanzees. They love information because it's fun. And the cool thing about that for chimpanzees is they often create a lot of inventions like Elon Musk is a chimpanzee. What's his name? Tesla was a chimpanzee.
Yeah.
Jobs. They just like trying cool things, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
And it
Oftentimes,
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's just cool to try it and learn about it.
yeah, they're the person who's like, hey, let's put a pink pinwheel on the car because that's kind of fun.
See what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and then people are like, okay, that's bad. But then they're also the person like, oh, let's put a phone and a computer and let's put those two things together. And then then people often
And
say,
make
oh,
a lot of money.
yeah, yeah. People also often say, oh, that's so stupid, what a dumb idea, and then boom.
And then it explodes.
Yeah,
So we're not going to go into like the deeper part of this to split it out unless you think we should. But how does it differ from the other? How does what you're doing here differ from like Myers-Briggs or like as you see it? Like what's the difference?
that's a great question because that's like one thing I'm always trying to say because obviously people are like, oh, it's just Myers-Briggs all over again. Even on my website, I do use the MBTI designations just because
Yeah.
it's something familiar.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's similar but different. Yeah.
yeah, I'm often retyping people, and people sometimes get upset. They'll be like, oh, I'm an INFP, and I'm like,
Right.
oh no, you're not. And they're like,
Yeah.
what? And I'm like, no, you're this one, and you're a panda. And then she's like,
Yeah.
what is that? Well, I'm like, technically an MBTI stands to be an INFJ, but that's what she's like. But they're like, oh no, I tested like this. I've always been this. I'm like, no, you're not. Trust me, I do this for a living, and you're
Yeah.
not. And then I'll ask them a question. I'm like, were you a good student? And they're like, I was a great student. I'm like, yeah, okay, you're not an INFP.
Yeah.
Like just little
Okay.
things like that.
Right.
'Cause I feel like most of the time when the biggest difference in methodology is I go based on values. Most of the Myers-Briggs stuff is based on what someone does. Like, are they introverted or extroverted? Do they use
Right.
their head more or do they use their heart more? And I'm always just like, yeah, but we do both of those things based on the context, right? That's really hard to judge. But
Right.
our values, you can generally tell someone's values right away.
Pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, like I had someone who thought that they were a shaman, so the self knowledge that was their one priority, and I said, "Oh no, you're a gatherer type." Whatever I think I said, "Oh no, I think you're a beaver," and they're just like, "Well, why would you say that? Like, how do you know? You know me better than I do." I'm like, "Well, I do it for
Right.
a living. I'm just saying, like, that." And they're, Why would you say that?" And I'm like, "Okay, now I got to go into this." And I said, and I'm like, because 5 minutes ago, you're looking at your shrimp taco for a whole minute because you were super scared that there was cabbage on the top of it and didn't know what that was. That's caution to me. And generally,
Right.
others have that caution.
Yeah.
Shaman not. So, generally, it's most of my reads are based on observation the things that people do and why they do it. And I think that's the core of my methodology. It's like, what do people do? Look at those things and then try to figure out why do they do it. And then you'll figure out what someone really is.
Yeah. So why is it important for people to learn this about themselves? I mean, I think it's fun and cool, and that's one of the reasons I like it. But I also think it's useful.
Mhm.
So what do you say about that?
I think the most useful thing we can have is to know ourselves. I think a lot of times people get into because they want to know other people so they can use that and go, okay, like that's great. So now who should I hook up with? Or like that's the number one question people ask is like, who should I date? But like I
Really?
do think, yeah, but in honesty, like definitely ourselves first, right? You got to know what makes you happy, what you truly want. Like I always say, find your anchor first. Now,
Yeah.
gatherers don't often have that problem because oftentimes they know themselves because half the people are like them and they're kind of being told already through their childhood that what they're doing is fine.
You're
But
getting
for the other half,
reinforced.
right, they're getting positive reinforcement. The other
Right.
half is like, oh, I'm being told what I'm doing is wrong. And so I'm always like, find your anchor first. And then once you find your anchor and know who you are, then you can start working on your weaknesses. And you can start saying, oh, this type does this better than me. Maybe I want to try doing this. You know,
Hmm.
my personality type, my weakness often was that I start a lot of things and I don't always finish them. So at least
Yeah.
knowing that, I know, okay, I'm not going to
You're
finish
the
everything
idea
that I
guy.
start. Yeah, I'm like, oh, you'd be great if I get a still and I start like making my own whiskey. That'd be so fun.
How
You know, I
fun.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, that does sound fun, right? Like all these things sound fun, but then do I end up doing it? Maybe not. I might have a still. I have a sausage machine to make sausage that I still have not made yet, and it's been like 9 months.
Because it
You know,
sounded like fun.
it sounded like fun. And I'm like, this sounds great. But I do realize, when I was younger, I realized and I was like, okay, I got to work on this. And through the course of my life, I feel like I've started two businesses, and so I have gotten better. I'm not perfect, but I've
Right.
gotten better. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I think that's important because if you know yourself, then you can adjust for those weaknesses
mhm.
and work on those weaknesses. And if you're unaware, you're just going to think that you do everything correct and you're never going to progress. I mean,
Right.
that's why I love this life coaching stuff so much because I always have kind of been wired that way as I like to learn about people and then learn about how to get better.
Oh yeah.
How can I change? How can I grow? How can I and that's fascinating to me. And like you, I go in many directions, but I think you have to understand yourself before you can change.
Yeah. I think if you don't understand yourself first, then you might. The funny thing is, people always ask me, "Can you change?" Because can I change type? Right? They're like, "Can I change my
Oh
personality?"
yeah. Yeah, I don't know that you can, but tell me
Yeah.
what you think about that.
Oh no, I always say, I don't think we change, we grow. And we can either grow into a better version of ourselves or a worse version of ourselves.
Right, right.
So
I
it's
agree with
important
that.
to know that, yeah, like to know who you are so that you don't end up trying to change. But you can grow into like just because your personality type, just because you're a fox and you're a shameless procrastinator and liar, doesn't mean you always have to be that way. You
Well,
can
I
also
hope I'm not a fox. I don't like lying.
oh, well, I say that as a joke. Foxes are great, but
Yeah.
exaggerate. I actually had someone. I told them they were a fox, and like, oh, what is a fox do? I'm like, well, they're shameless. They kind of lie a bit. She's like, I never lie. I'm like, you don't? And she's like, oh, well, I'm like, I do
A
exaggerate.
little bit. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's what I
You're
mean.
like, well, then I'm right.
Yes, I'm right. You're Han. I'm like, how do you not like being a fox? That's like Han Solo, James Bond. Like that's like
Yeah. How cool
cool.
is that?
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah. Okay. So you're not changing your personality type. You're just improving on yourself.
yeah, you're growing
But
into a better
understanding your
version.
personality types helps you do that because you know your weaknesses.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and
And
you
you
know your
can
strengths
accommodate.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can play, and so that okay, like I have strengths that maybe aren't being shown right now because maybe I'm in an environment where I don't get that. Like a lot of times people ask cultural things, and I write about that in the book. There's so many cultural assumptions like that we just make and we accept to be true. That's why I love personality. It's like, no, that it'll teach you that some of the assumptions we have are not true. Like if you go
Yeah.
to any culture, they will almost automatically say, oh yeah, we're a culture that likes to eat. We love food and we love providing
Right.
for people. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that can't be just your culture because that's every culture.
Right. Right.
So maybe it's just your personality type that you want to feed me, which I appreciate because there's other people in your culture who are definitely not going to do that.
Right. Yeah.
Like if you're, like typical stereotypical Japanese culture is like very like no physical touch, very hands off, kind of more like keeping your emotions in. But if you're a peacock and you have that personality type and you grow up in that culture, there's nothing wrong with you, but you're definitely going to feel like there's something wrong.
You'll feel different.
Yeah, you're gonna be like, why can't I hug people? I just want to hug people. I want to like dance around and be goofy and like be really showy with
Have a
my
good
emotions.
time.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the flip side, of course, like I had a friend who is Cuban, or not he is Cuban. He's Cuban and Mexican, so obviously Latin American. And in his culture, like there's a lot of hugging. His family's always touching, and he's of the personality type where he's like, no, I want my personal space. Do not touch me.
Yeah.
Right? There's a conflict there, right? So
So how can, if you think you have these certain personality traits, how can you use it to either help you relate to other people, either family or strangers? Like, what do you think are the tools that you can use to use this to your advantage once you learn it?
So, well, I would say definitely buy the book because that's the best tool. No,
Yeah,
no,
and we'll tell
shameless
people,
plug.
we'll read the title again and tell them where to find it at the end.
Yeah, no, I was just joking, but I mentioned the book too because the
No,
way
you shouldn't joke. You got to
I,
push your book. I do it. I push my book too.
yeah, plug, plug, plug.
Right,
But when I wrote the book, I know a lot of personality books are written in a way where they have you take a test in the beginning and then the whole book are prescriptions. But
right.
I'm always like, yeah, but what if the test is wrong?
Sure.
Then all the prescriptions are going to be wrong. I mean, as you
Right,
know, like it's I always relate it to like a diagnosis. Like if you're a doctor
yeah,
and you're like you have the wrong diagnosis, it doesn't matter what, treatment you give. In fact, it could be harmful based on.
right.
And so the way I wrote the Power of Personality was as a tool to teach people how to become the test. So it teaches you all the things that I went over. No, not all the things, but like a lot of the breakdown of each animal type and tells you
Hmm.
why they are the way they are and how to split them up. So if you have that and you have that knowledge, then just living your everyday life, you can go like, oh, my kid, I noticed that they did this. Oh, that means that they're probably like this. So maybe I should treat them this way, or this might be the most effective way to work with them or talk to them. Like a story I've been telling a lot is my cousin's kid. I was shucking oysters with him on New Year's. I was teaching him how to do that, and he just graduated pharmacy school. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, what do you want to do now? He's like, I don't know, as long as it's something where I don't have to be in the same place all day long. And I'm like, yeah.
You
I'm
picked the
like,
wrong, yeah, you picked the wrong
okay,
career, dude.
right. And the funny thing is, I kind of knew that when he started, but of
Yeah,
course, it was none of my business. But I'm like, I
right.
know your personality. He had a hunter personality. I'm like,
Oh,
hunters as a pharmacist? Not really.
doesn't
Generally,
sound good.
yeah. And so what I said was like, and this is something that people can take, like this would be an actionable that you could use. Knowing that he was a hunter, I was like, oh, maybe you should try pharmaceutical sales. That might
Mm,
be something you enjoy. You'll be able to travel,
right.
be able to go to different places.
Meet a lot
You'll
of people.
right, meet the people.
Yeah,
It's a hustle. You're gonna have to hustle to get what you earn. But of course, hunters don't mind the hustle. They actually love the hustle, you know.
yeah,
Whereas a gatherer might be like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. I like to have a set salary. I don't necessarily know if I want to work on commission and stuff. Where hunters love that because in their mind, they're like, that means that if I do really well, then I'm extra rewarded.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're
And
the ambitious kind of for the sake of ambitiousness.
they love the game. They just love to
Okay.
play. And for them,
Yeah.
that's play for them. And if they
Yeah.
feel like if they play the game the best way possible, and if they're the best at it, then they should get rewarded the
They get
most.
rewarded. Yeah.
Yeah. So I recommended that to him, and he was like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to waste all the knowledge that I learned in pharmacy school." And then I was like, "Yeah, but you only have one life, and when that gets taken away, it's not coming back. So do you want to waste
Right.
that?" And he was just
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, that's a good point."
Yeah.
So
That's a good way to look at it. So I don't know. Do you know anybody that's a veterinarian? Like, do you understand what we do and
I
do you
do
think
actually.
there's a specific type of person that would enjoy that more than others?
Yes, and it's generally going to be the one that's very similar to like the doctor personality type or a nurse personality type. I
Okay,
do
yeah.
know one of my best teachers. I say that I shouldn't say that, but I don't have a company anymore. One of my best teachers, she was my friend's younger sister, and she went to school and she was a math major at UCLA. And so if you're a math major, you're only taking math classes. And so this is a good example of how like it's probably better to find out what you love and what you want to do as early as possible.
First, yeah.
Because what she realized like after she graduated was like, I don't want to do anything with math. I want to be a vet. I love animals. So unfortunately, since she only took math classes, and math classes are no joke,
Had
they're
to
pretty
start
hard.
over.
She had to start over.
Yeah, we didn't have to take real high math classes. I can attest to that.
Yeah, I even told her, I'm like, oh wait, but you didn't have to take any science classes, and you took a lot of math. She's like, I don't even need math for vet school, but I need all these science classes that I didn't take. So she was taking all these things, and now she's a vet now, and she's fantastic, and she
Yeah.
did. She used to say like before when she was like doing like being an assistant, she always said, I work at Petco, and her mom would hate that. She's like, stop telling people you work at Petco. I'm like, what's wrong with that? Like, well, you do more than that. She's like, well, yeah, but I technically am working at Petco at the moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Um,
So what kind of personalities do you think would thrive in that kind of environment?
for
There's lots of things you can do as a veterinarian. So I think all personality types can find their niche in vet med. I mean, that's my opinion. But but as a personality guy, what do you think?
the most common in the medical field are gatherers and specifically bears. For sure. Bears, their strength is they're really protective. They like to help the weak and the helpless.
Mm,
So
that
like they
makes
make up a
sense.
lot of special ed teachers,
Okay.
nurses, of course. Like they're just great at that. They're very patient. They also make great pharmacists too, because they don't mind being in vigilant and staying in the same place.
Like a routine.
Right. They like the routine. Elephants are the same way. I'm gonna guess that there's probably more. Actually, I don't know for sure, but elephants are just a little bit more friendlier. So if you think of like a bear as protecting the people that they love and they're close to, an
Hmm.
elephant is constantly bringing people into their family because elephants and bears prioritize family. So elephant
Right.
is that person who's, they're the mother or father of the kid who's always inviting their son and daughter's friends over for dinner. They're like, "Oh, you want to stay for dinner? We got like
Having
lots."
parties and yeah.
Yeah, they love that stuff.
Yeah.
They're
Okay.
so I imagine that's a really common vet personality type. I think when you maybe get into more of like the equine and like at a zoo, you're probably going
Mhm.
to get to more hunter territory because
Yeah.
a lot of them are traveling to different places.
Right.
They might go to
More
Africa.
variety.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Variety. You have to like go.
Right.
I'm working on an elephant today, and now I'm working on
Right.
a chimpanzee. Even though I
Yeah.
know the specializations and stuff, but you know,
Yeah.
primates. I said I'm working on a chimpanzee, and now I'm working on a gorilla.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think a more hunter for those, but of course everyone can do any position or any job. I just always think of what's the why, like why do you enjoy it?
Right. Yeah.
Generally gatherers are in the medical field because like they enjoy healing people because it makes them feel like safe and everyone's like in a very safe, secure place.
Yeah. And it's one of those professions that is very needed. I imagine that they like that feeling of
Oh
being
yeah.
needed and wanted and
A
in
hundred
a way.
percent.
Yeah.
If you have a beaver, this is a random personality insight, but if you know a beaver and they're a type of gatherer and they love their doing their duty and they love doing the dirty work, so they love like doing the dishes.
Oh,
But they might do it like, I got to do the dishes. But the
right.
worst thing you can do is like, oh no, let me do that for you. They're gonna be like, no, 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 I got it. Because what you're telling them is they have the inability, they're incapable of doing that.
Of doing it correctly or whatever.
Right. They're like, no, no, I got it. This is what I do. So
Yeah.
you have people like that who just really want to feel needed. The best thing you can tell them is like, you know what? I appreciate you. I appreciate what you just did. Like shine a spotlight on them and say, I appreciate that you do all the dirty work and that you don't expect anyone to thank you for it. You just do it. And
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. The verbal praise they're into.
Right, right.
That's cool. I love it. All right. So what have I not asked you that I should before we start to wrap this up?
Oh, that's I mean, a lot of times people ask what their personality type is or what I
Well, you
think.
can type me too.
Oh,
I would, if you can figure it out, or I'm sure you can. But yeah, you tell me what you think I am. That'd be great. I
and I
love
know you
that.
mentioned your children and your
Yes.
husband. So like, I mean, sometimes people have me take shots at that, like try to figure
Yeah.
out based on their relationship. I would
Oh,
say
yeah.
from what I've heard, okay, so this is unusual because it's not one of the things I said
You can
for
ask me
that.
questions if you want to, if you need help.
Um, what's your favorite thing about being a vet?
Um, Besides the obvious that I've always loved animals, I think I like the relationships of us with the clients and us with the team and making sure that um that things are running well, but I also like the variety. Like
Mm,
I like the fact that that every day I don't know what's going to happen. And
okay.
I kind of like that. I get excited on a day, not necessarily when really complicated things come in, but when it's just different people, different situations. I like that.
And this is going to sound like a random question, but I love random questions. That's what I'm always doing. Um, like I once asked someone, "Oh, do you like wine tasting?" And she was like, "I love wine tasting." I'm like, "I know exactly what you are." She's like, "You got it just for one question?" Well,
Really?
more than that, but yeah,
Yeah.
like the way you said it. And the
Yeah.
question I ask is like, were you ever like in school? Were you ever like in student government or president of a club, like recycling club,
Yes,
environmental
I
club?
wasn't in student government, but I did like I would do anything. Like I was a sports kid. I was in the band. I,
Uh,
I was kind of more quiet as a kid than I am now. But I'm like a joiner and a person that wants to always be in. If they say they need a volunteer, do you
what
want to be in
sport?
charge of this? Do you want to be the president of that?
What
That's
sport did you play?
me. Softball, volleyball were my
Okay.
two big ones.
Okay, then I'm pretty sure I know what you are then. Now I'm good. Even
Okay.
though I asked you
Okay.
questions, so that was a little bit of a cheat, but I
Oh,
kind
that's
of
okay.
told.
That's
I
okay.
think you're a dolphin.
A
You seem like
dolphin.
a dolphin. That would be a shaman type. So they
Yeah.
seek self-knowledge. I mean, and I would say that because of how you said like your favorite thing are the relationships between people. And you said not running, but then you quickly correct yourself. Well, not like running in that way, like not in a logistical fashion, but
Yeah,
just like,
I'm not good at, yeah, I'm not good at details. I don't like when I ran my own business, but what I liked about it was being in charge and solving the problems and taking care of the people. I didn't like the paperwork and the taxes, and I did it.
oh
I didn't
yeah.
enjoy it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's the thing that's a big difference too between mine and MBTI. So a dolphin in MBTI would be an ENFJ. And MBATI would tell you that, oh, well, the J is structured. So structured people will do all the logistical stuff and all that kind of stuff and like doing taxes and things
Mhm.
like that. But I'm like, no, but shamans don't like necessarily love doing that. Like that's not what they don't get a kick out of doing any of those things if it doesn't
Yeah,
have a connection with doing something that gets them closer to who they are as a person. So
yeah,
taxes is not like you're like, oh yeah, I'm doing my taxes correctly. I'm discovering
right.
a lot about myself. Not
Yeah,
really, but starting your own business and running your own business, that does like that
right.
represents you,
Yeah.
that business,
Yeah, that
right?
makes sense to me. That's
Yeah.
probably who I am.
That would be my guess, at least.
Yeah,
So
at least on the surface level, right?
yeah, and at the end of the day, if you read the portrait, that's generally the best thing. Is if you read the dolphin portrait, and like, oh yeah, that is me,
See if
or
it
you're not.
matches.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah,
I'm
because
pretty
that's
sure.
always there's always subtle differences, I think, in some of those, but
Right.
it's not I like dolphins, so and I got to swim with them once and that was super cool. So
Oh, that is pretty cool.
I'm into that. Yeah.
They're
Okay,
team
so
players.
yeah, I like that. Yeah, I'm kind of a team player.
All the sports you said were team sports. They weren't like
Right. Yeah, pickleball's my big one right now, and that's kind
oh
of
yeah.
part too. Yeah, I love that. Pickleball's the new one that I'm playing. Okay, so tell me what did we miss? Anything that we should get out there? Because we can do this again too. I'll have to read your book and then I'll have you back and
Oh yeah.
I'll be able to ask you more in-depth questions maybe.
Oh, you and then I can type your children. I know
Oh yeah, that would
they're
be
adult children
awesome.
now, so I
Well,
don't.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're both adults, but yeah, I would love that. My daughter's super into this, so maybe she'll be on the podcast with us because she
Oh
loves
yeah.
rigs.
If she's into it, then that generally means she's probably. I mean, this is a very thin slice, but she's probably a shaman too. Because
Yeah,
shamans love personality stuff, because obviously for obvious reasons, self-knowledge and all.
yeah, I'm sure she is. Yeah. Okay, cool. So anything I didn't ask that we need to say?
No, I mean I'm no,
Okay.
I'm great.
All right. I think we did a pretty good job. Now I'm more curious. I want to get more into it for sure.
Oh,
Okay,
fun.
so tell everyone where they can learn more about you, where they can find you, where they can find your book,
So
all of that.
if you want to take the test, now granted, I always put the disclaimer that it's just a cookie cutter test. I did create it, but like anything else, it's an online test. You can find the test at utopiaproject.com. And that's Utopia like YouTube, like YOU, because we can find our Utopia through
Yeah,
you.
and I'll put it in the notes so everybody can find it. I'll put a link.
Yeah, and you take the assessment there. And then the book, you can buy that anywhere you buy books. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, where your local bookstore, you can order it from there. And it's called The Power of Personality. And I definitely recommend if you really want to understand personality, doing that and reading the book over just taking the test, because you might find your answer to be different.
Right, right. When you read the book, sometimes there's subtle differences
Yeah.
that the test might not pick up.
Yeah, and I use a lot of like stories and anecdotes, pop culture references. There might be a little too many pop culture references because people are like, I got 60% of them, but I didn't know who Grandmaster Caz was. Like, he's a great rapper from the 70s. Come on.
Or you can still look that up. You can Google it if you
Yeah,
don't.
and I got a lot of footnotes in the back of the book too. Yeah, but you can always
Okay.
Google. So
So
just
you
have
can figure it.
have Siri ready.
Yeah.
Um, but it's supposed to be meant for fun. Like I wrote the book in a style that's fun so that people can relate to it. Because to me, personality stuff should be fun. It's not something that,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, if you make it not fun, then you're doing something wrong.
Right, right. Yeah. It's just so useful. Like I love all
Yeah.
this stuff. It's really fun and interesting. It's interesting to try to figure other people out too, I think.
Oh yeah, a lot of times people ask me like characters and like typing like fictional characters and like celebrities and real people, and that's
Yeah. Do you have a few that you really like?
like fictional characters. or
Yeah, just
what,
examples that you're like, oh, this is a really good one for this particular type.
so the show, Game of Thrones is the one I always use because there's so many characters in Game of Thrones that are well drawn. So you can
Okay.
see the different conflicts very easily and you can mirror
Yeah.
them, you know.
Okay.
Uh, like, Jamie is your stereotypical fox, Jamie Lannister. Brienne is your stereotypical bear. And in fact, that they are theoretically a perfect match. And within the show's confines, you can see why they match so well.
That's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, their strengths and weaknesses, they can grow from knowing each other. They can
Mhm.
have conflict because they are very different, but
Yeah.
within those conflicts, they can grow. And I think that's the most important thing in life is just keep growing.
I love it. Yeah. That's what this podcast is all about
That's awesome.
is keep growing and getting better and stronger and figuring yourself out. I
And
love
that's
it.
also, by the way, a very shaman thing. So that was also
Is
another, I
it?
mean, I already had that in the back of my mind. Yeah, you have
Yeah.
a podcast about like people like growing and learning more about themselves. That's very
Oh, yeah. That
shaman-like.
that gets me very excited. Okay, cool. I love it. So everyone, this is Eric G. And I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm really happy you were on the podcast. And
Happy to be here.
hopefully maybe we can do it again.
Yeah, I'd love
Come up
to.
with a lot more. I want to learn way more about this. Yeah. Okay, everyone. Have a beautiful week. Thanks for being here. Bye, Eric.
Bye.